Good day, everybody. Welcome to the Deal Scout. On today's show, we're going to have a conversation with Mr. Jack. Jack, welcome to the show, man.
Well, good to see you, Josh. Yes, thank you.
It's good to see you too. My dad used to say, it's good to be seen, right? That means we're we're on the right side of the grass. So, Jack, you and I are hanging out, and a buddy walks up and they go, "Hey, Jack, who are you? What do you do?" How do you respond?
I'm the CEO of Innocom Bioequities. Innocom does three things. It provides CEO advisory, which is kind of where we started. Then we provide infrastructure development and management. We found that in the life sciences world, which is the space we are in, the genius scientist generally doesn't have a business background. Too much of his education has gone into the science side. And so we then provide the business side. We found that in life science, it takes so long to get a product to market that it takes a lot of capital. And the time and capital, then we were asked to help find that capital. So we do the third leg now is capital introduction.
Awesome. So kind of walk us through how did you get into this world with bioequities and what you're doing over here? How'd you get started?
Where'd it come from? Huh?
Where'd it come from? Where'd you come from?
Well, I'm happy to share, Josh, all the way back into the real estate development family where I was born. During World War II, my father was a general contractor, did much of the Oakland Army-based concrete work. Grandfather before that did concrete throughout the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. After World War II, my father decided there was more money into buying land from the Moragas and the others like them and subdividing it. And he ended up with a good portion of Orinda was subdivided by his company. And then from there, he said residential is great, but he'd much rather get into industrial. So there were billboards up and down the freeway saying Abe Doty Realtors, Abe R. Doty Realtors. Of course, when I came out of Cal, I said the last thing in the hell that I want to do is anything to do with real estate. So I went over and worked for First Emporium Capital Company, which was fun. Learned an awful lot about retailing, a very well-run company. And then from there went to IBM. I was with IBM for several years. Ran a sub-office up in Humboldt County and Del Norte. And had some fairly high-profile sales. I was the leader in 11 out of 22 different categories. So I feel awfully good about that. And after that, of course, I came back to real estate. And so, but I didn't want to be a broker and I didn't want to be a developer. I wanted to be a property manager. So I went to work for Milton Meyer here, which is a large real estate, office real estate guys. And from that spun over into my own company. And then that company became an advisor about the management in development. And then, of course, became a developer myself. And I can look out and see a couple of rather high buildings, 16-story buildings that I built in San Francisco. Well, the crash of 1989 occurred with the earthquake. And then right after that, the riots. And so it was not a good time. Almost everybody moved out of it. So I moved over to food and became the CFO because real estate development is primarily finance, and became the CFO of Granny Goose Foods, which had 6 weeks before its warn notice would be up and it would be bankrupt. And we threw money into it real quick, saved it, and took a company from originally about 75 million down to 35. 3 years later, it was at 105 million in sales, took its losses of 3 million up to profit of 5. And we did, so we had some pretty good success there. Stayed with food for a number of years, and then the hair got white, and I decided I might back off a little bit from running things and became an advisor, became a CFO to go. And then from that, a Newport advisor, which was the CEO advisory. And then from that, moved into these three legs that I'm talking now.
Yeah. Now, why'd you choose, life sciences? So you've been in, real estate, you've been in, the food industry. Why bio? Why life science?
Well, let's disqualify first. I'll be Sherlock Holmes and we'll do it by.
Yeah.
Moving it out. Real estate development started out, you could be an independent and accumulate cash. But what happened has been pretty much taken over by national companies. And so you're competing against much larger projects and huge amounts of capital. So that kind of pushed us back on that. The second, food is the opposite. There's no entry level barrier in food. If you're a big food company, there is, but those are again the same problem we have with real estate. And so we were doing chocolates and those sorts of things. And anybody can make chocolate in their kitchen, and they take it over to Molly Stone's or Safeway and so forth, put it on the shelf. So we found that the competition was a little tight, and so then we realized that life science is pretty much what the Bay Area is. You have Stanford Medical, and you have University of California in San Francisco. You have Genentech with lots of spinoffs in South City. And it was clearly the place to be. So I joined California Life Science Association as a partner. And they asked, would you come in and advise us? And so I did some facilitating for them and got to know a lot of people, and life science just kind of leapt into our laps.
Yeah. Now you mentioned as you got older and gray started coming into your hair, you started to more step into roles instead of operating more advisory and investor roles. Like at what point did that start happening to you in your life journey, right? Where you go, I built a bunch of cool things by on my own. Now it's time to start building it through other people. Like walk us through like what was going on mentally there and how you helped make that decision.
The company that merged in and became Inocom Bioequities was Metro Pacific Business Development Services. That was founded in 1976. Okay, is that right? Yeah. Well, it goes way back. And what it was designed to do, it was the development arm, it did the real estate development, it did a lot of things. But it was always a fallback between ventures. I could then do the advisory. So I've been doing advisory most of my career, for better or for worse. And so I'm accustomed to that. When I gave up the operating role was probably 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
Was it hard to step out of that role? Because I mean,
Yes.
you've been doing it for a long time. Why do you think that was a challenge for you?
Well, you're used to issuing orders. And you start issuing orders to your client, they don't like that.
Yeah.
So, and on one hand, to be a good advisor, you have to speak the truth, and the truth. The reason you're valuable is because you've been around longer, and so and they don't always want to hear what that truth is, and so that's the hard part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. What's your favorite part about business? Now you've been in many different types of business. You've been doing it for a while. You can't just say advisory, right? You can't, because you said that, right? But what's your favorite part of a business? Like jazzes you up? Like you wake up and you got that mission today. Like what part of business do you love?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer, really, Josh, because many aspects of business are exciting, and that's why there are different divisions. But the theory of business is one thing that charges me. For example, I had to learn the hard way that there are three different legs in the stool of a business. There's the sales and marketing, there's operations and manufacturing, and then there's finance and infrastructure. I always like the infrastructure, the idea that what creates the business. Now, I love sales. I love that kick when you bring the order in, but you kind of move beyond that. Operations, love to set it up, but I don't like to administer it. But the finance side, you can do a nice spreadsheet and start seeing if you can get the damn thing to work. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it actually work, right? Like it might feel good to close a deal, but does the deal make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. So, all right. So you've got this business now, and you guys do CEO advisory, infrastructure, and you're starting to get into this, do more and more because of a need that you found for introductions to capital, right? People go, hey, this is a hard business to be in because of the wait time to get things from production to approval to sales and such. So when people come to you, they go, I have an issue, right? And it could be about capital. How do you approach someone coming to you and they go, or when you're looking to buy a company or raise money for a company, like how do you approach it differently than other groups?
Uh, that's a really good question. And why am I confident in doing it? Is what you're really saying too.
You got it.
We are not a Series 7 licensed firm. In order for us to do what we do, we must do it in introduction, not in terms of procurement. And that means that we take a seat on the board of directors and we take a C-level job in the company. Now, that's not as difficult as you think, because they're trying to get the people together to build the company. So they're pleased to have the finance guy come in. So I'm the CFO, fractional CFO right now in 5 companies. And that puts me also in the position to do quite often what the CFO does with the CEO is the advisory. Quite often the CFO is much more mature than the CEO. You've got the guy with the wild ideas, and he wants to do it. That's especially true in life science. They come out of college, they go to grad school, they're working on projects, they see something that really excites them, and then they procure the rights to do it. Well, they need some maturity alongside. We come in and provide that. That's what is our, I hate the phrase, but secret sauce. We're in the company. We meet with them every week, an hour and a half a week, talking about their issues. Usually we listen,
That's good.
So, what upset you this week, Matt? And Matt reported a week or two ago that I just made a presentation to an angel group, and why are they so antagonistic? Why are they challenging what I'm doing? They're not the authorities. The answer is, who's the CEO here? What you did is you let them do that. Wow. And he stopped and thought about it. And he says, you're going to have to start putting on the armor before you go in there and fix it. Yeah. And so he got it. And it's fun to have that conversation. You get to really bolster their self-confidence.
Yeah. All right. So let's do some role play, Jack. So I'm the CEO of a life science company. Give me in a range of like, what would be a good size of the company? 10 million, 50 million, 100 million?
Well, they don't have any sales at all.
Okay. So 0. Right. Okay.
Pre-revenue.
All right. So I'm the young visionary guy, and I'm about to go pitch to an angel group, right? Because, and you're about to give me a quick pep talk before going on, helping me, put on my armor and appropriately pitch to an angel group. And you get, a few minutes with Josh before my pitch. What advice do you have for me?
Well, I would like to do it after the pitch when you're a little bruised, where you're going to listen to me.
Yeah, right.
So the first thing is remember, they need you too. They have this money sitting there. Number 2 is an angel group is the most difficult, because that's play money. They're really not there to invest. They're there to have lunch with their buddies, and they don't pay very much. You pay, $10,000 to show up in front of them, and maybe not that much, but 5, and they're there just for the cost of the lunch, and they're having a nice time, and you get to go on. So keep that in mind, Josh, that they're there. Now, the next thing is, remember, they're not there because they want to learn about your science. They're there because they want to make a return on their investment. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you've got to say what the product is. Yeah, you got to say why it's unique. Yeah, you got to say why you're protected, your patents, and so forth. But you really don't want to go into the sort of science that you're used to always presenting. And you don't want to use a lot of initials, because they don't know what the hell they are.
Nor do they care. They don't care either, right? How many initials do you have behind your name and the acronyms and such? Yeah. What do you think is the biggest? Now you've seen this a lot, and you guys got your own adventures that you're working on, which we can talk about as much as you're able to. What do you think is the biggest downfall when it comes, or maybe screw up that a CEO pitching and they come back to you bruised afterwards? I'm pitching to a group, an angel group, family office, institutional investor, something like that. And they come back and they go, dang it, Jack, I just got my ass whooped. And you go, okay, come on. Now you're ready to listen.
Yeah.
What do you think are those few points that really get them.
Yeah, and this is way oversimplified.
Yeah.
But you have to think in terms of the returns to the investor. How do they get their money back? And then how do they get a reasonable return per year on that? And a reasonable return at this high risk is 30%. It's not 10 to 15. Because what will happen is when they invest, half of them won't come through and the other half to bear that 15%. Okay. Yeah. So you need to, the most important document you have is your 8-year pro forma, showing when you need the money, when it starts coming back, and how it works. Okay. Now you notice I didn't say anything about how come your cure for cancer is unique. You will say that, you won't be able to resist that. But,
yeah. How do I get my money back? How do I get a return? What's in it for me, right? That's what people want to know.
That's correct. And people who have money especially want to know the answers. That's why they have money, because they always ask that question. Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's a great point. And you said something that I think us fellow entrepreneurs need to hear is they need you too, right? It's a partnership with an investor. I think when you see desperate founders who are just, they need money so bad, what it does is it just creates a unilateral need. But when you find like a good partner in an investor, I think that's what creates good opportunity for that. When you're coaching your groups as CFO, and like let's just say all things money being equal, when they're pitching to a group, what makes a good investor versus a bad investor as you're pitching to these groups or individuals?
Yeah, that has a simple answer. A know-it-all investor is a real problem. If they're know-it-all at that level, they're going to be really difficult when they get on the board. And what they know is not what generally you need to know to run the company.
Yeah. So ego is a big challenge, right?
Yeah. A narcissistic personality.
Yeah. Because then they, sitting on your cap table or sitting on your board table, they could actually cause more trouble than encouragement and pushing you forward and opening up doors. That's what I find makes a good investor. Now, kind of a personal question, Jack. Behind you, there's a ton of books, right? There's a ton of books, and I'm seeing a lot of them. So you and I are having a cup of coffee, and I'm like, all right, Jack, thanks for the coffee. Thanks for chatting with me. Hey, I gotta go. And you're like, well, before you go, Josh, let me give you a book. And you pull out one of your books and you hand it to me. What would be that book that you give to me?
Usually it would be The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Okay, that's kind of the fundamental. I'm going to give you a reason why, though. It's not because it's just it's catchy. The authors were philosophers and theologians. They spent a lot of time looking at both philosophy and theology and distilled all of these different networks of how to live your life into just 7 rules. And those rules are, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, it doesn't make any difference. They're in all of the religions, and they're also in Plato, and they're in Sophocles and so forth. They're all always there. What they did is they distilled it down, emphasizing be proactive, the first one. That's half the book. Don't always be responding. Okay. And also it's good to be disengaged. Urgency is not always, you don't have to respond to urgency, those sorts of things. And see, I'm getting ramped up on it. But also seek to understand before you seek to be understood. Oh, and first things first. I mean, take a look. What are you doing screwing around with that? You should be doing this. Okay. All these things. Yeah.
That is a good book. And it's not a new book. It's an older book. And like you were saying, the philosophy behind it, it's been spoke about for a very long time.
Yes.
Out of that book and out of the principles, which one do you think you struggle with the most?
Being proactive is not my problem. I had to learn that urgency, of the 4 squares on that chapter, urgency is the least important one. It's, okay. I guess the one that I most focus on is, you heard me say it first, was seek to understand before you seek to be understood. That's the statement of humility. Okay, and we were going back to that investor who doesn't do that. Right? Mm-hmm. The bad investor doesn't do that. Yeah. But the other is, of course, first things first, and that one's pretty obvious. Seek synergism. These are right there. Never pursue win-lose. Right? You don't end up with. You asked me just for one, so I did that.
Well, I could see that that's a stable for your business repertoire. Like you like that book, so and you could probably chat about it for a while. So as you're building this out, you've been in San Francisco for a while. Even you talked about your grandfather built a lot of stuff on the West Coast, right? So you grew up West Coast, seeing the world change and evolve. Out of all the things that you've seen, like what surprises you most about where the West Coast has been, especially the Bay Area? It's right, incredible things that you've probably seen, especially during like the .com eras, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. My family was in California in 1822. We're Society of California Pioneers. So we're very much California. I witnessed the change of California basic industry from agrarian to industrial, and then from industrial into service. And but to answer your question more specifically, what surprises me the most is the emphasis on high tech. That's a way of fixing things, but that's not a way of doing things. That's a way of, that's a device. Now it doesn't work, and I'm fighting my computer. We laughed about that's why I came on 2 minutes late on this call, because the high tech ain't working. But there you go. Yeah. So I guess that's a surprise. But what I'd like more, I guess if I were to style myself, I'm really an urban economic economist. And so it's very close to my heart. So you build a tunnel and you build a bridge, and suddenly you can build a rinda. And you buy land for, I don't know, $750 an acre, maybe it wasn't that, $75 an acre. And you can sell it for, $75,000 an acre. Mm-hmm. Okay, because of now it has transportation. Well, that rolled out all the way across the Bay Area. And so we were very good at growing houses, not so much growing crops. And now it's reversing. There's a lot of densification coming, and people like being in high rise. My den here is in a 12-story building, and I like it. I can see the Golden Gate Bridge. It's a little higher than other people, so I get to do that. But
yeah. Now, if you and I could go back and ask your grandfather when he was, a young guy, started out, building Bay Area and, doing construction and real estate, if we could go back and ask him a question, like if you could go back when he was a younger guy, hungry to make a business, what question would you ask Grandpa?
Well, I didn't know either one of my grandfathers. They were late marriages, and I was late in the family too. So, and I'm late in years too. So you're going back a long time. My paternal grandfather went to Hawaii to buy the island. A bunch of young guys went to buy the island. That was happening. The king of Hawaii was always selling the island. It was a good way to promote tourism. Come on, everyone, to buy the island. And then he went off from there, went to Guam. Go on down and see. And so, tell me that story. What a story. And there's not a whole lot of richness to it. I do know the story. We have pictures. And then his brother, his brother-in-law, also was there in the Philippines during the Spanish-American War. And those would be really interesting. Now that's historic. You're going back into the last quarter of the 19th century. It was my grandfather also then, the superintendent of construction. He became an authority on reinforced concrete. Now, reinforced concrete was really modern technology in the late 19th century. You had concrete went all the way back to the Romans, but it wasn't reinforced. So it would crack and earthquakes would do it. The
Yeah.
steel keeps it together. So he introduced that technology. So he was superintendent of concrete construction on the St. Francis Hotel. Okay, so that give you an idea of a real land.
Wow. Very
Yeah,
cool.
very cool. Yeah. And then from that, he became a concrete contractor, a general contractor. But my father then broadened it out to more. Yeah.
Wow. That
So
is
we
pretty
do
cool.
it.
So if we're
Yeah.
sitting down with Jack, if we're sitting down with your grandfather, right? We're having a conversation. Talk to me about the time when you went over to Hawaii with the king of Hawaii to buy Hawaii. That's a cool story, right? Like that would be
Cool.
that is very cool. All right, so Jack, we get to go in the future, right? And you can have a conversation with your future self, right? Let's just say, 20 years in the future, and we're all still alive, right? Your life science company created some things that made us live longer, and we get a conversation with our future Jack, right? 20 years down the line, what questions and advice would you ask your future self? That's a tough question, isn't it?
Well, especially at my age, because you're talking about uh, the likelihood of my surviving that 20 years is much greater today than it was 100 years ago.
Yeah.
But it is still not all that likely. In my class reunion, 50% of my classmates are dead. Both of my old girlfriends long gone. Right? So,
You outlived your girlfriend, your ex-girlfriends. Like that's a win in itself right there. Right?
Right. So what I'm doing is stalling because it's a complicated question.
Yeah.
That's not a simple one. The first thing is to what degree can I still remain energetic and active, and yet still, to use the cliche, sniff the roses, or begin to sniff the roses. I like work a lot. I like when I'm doing spreadsheets and so forth. That's, wow, look, it's a puzzle. Okay. And so I can do that. But I also have not traveled. I've got on my maternal side, we came from England. Never been there. Would like to meet cousins and nieces and nephews and that stuff. And then while I'm at it, I don't want to go to any of the big tourist places, but I'd like to have been to Rome and yeah. So I'm going to ask my future self, how'd you manage to do that? How'd you manage to take the time and go do it? Because you won't do it unless you do it. Yeah.
That is a good question. So let's flip the script over here. Like, what question do you wish that someone would ask you, or like what question do you think that every person, every deal maker, every CFO, every CEO, what question do you think people should be asking themselves?
That's contrary to my business philosophy. I will attempt to answer it.
Okay, let's hear that.
My business philosophy is the CEO's job is to not penetrate heavily into any given area, but be in charge of all areas. Mm-hmm. That's the CEO's job.
Yeah.
And so it's really the definition of the Renaissance man. Know a little bit about everything and everything about something. Yes, good. Okay. So now you want to get over to the everything about something. That varies where their expertise comes from. Person comes up in sales. Okay. That's what he brings to the table. Comes up in product development. His grandma made a really good macaroon. That's going to be what you're going to see on the stick, and he's going to be the authority on it. Come in finance, and it's going to be a very boring company, but very successful.
Right.
Yeah. I guess that's I didn't avoid the question too bad, did I? I don't know.
Yeah. But let's dig into what you said, like the role of a CEO. Now that's kind of counter intuitive for what people are preaching today, right? Be the specialist, like dig deep into a vertical or a niche or a mindset. But you're saying like the Renaissance man actually makes a good CEO, knows a lot about a lot, right?
Yes, and there's a distinction between the entrepreneur and then the CEO of a going concern. Okay, so what I described then as the CEO of a going concern, where the entrepreneur, he's developing it. That's his shortcoming. Remember, we talked about he makes a presentation to the capital market. They are finance people, and so he doesn't talk their language, and they don't understand his language or hers. Okay, who can't make it just his. And so so the idea then is to bring together those different disciplines, which is the joy of business, isn't it?
Mm.
Okay.
The joy of business. Now, you've been in business for a long, I love that title, the joy of business. You've been in business for a long time. And now you guys are looking to invest and build a bunch of different businesses in life sciences. So there's a joy for you. If we go back, or go to the future, Jack, and we go and we won, right? How do we know we won in your business? Like the process of it is joyful for you, but how do you know that you won, that you did it?
Well, I'm sure you've asked this question of others and probably going to have the same answer I'm going to give you. Money is simply a marker. You want to make a lot of money, therefore you won. Okay, yeah. And that has to be there. And a lot of money is a definition. What does it take to retire? A couple, $3 million, and you can retire very comfortable in an expensive city like San Francisco. And you're not dealing in that. You're dealing in much more than that. But if you get up in there, what do you do if you start bringing in the tens of millions of dollars? What do you do with that money? You give it away. There is no other use for it. Or you can be a miser and you keep it, and that becomes a hobby in itself, but we're not talking about it. So the marker is there, okay? But that's not where the joy comes. I have 8 portfolio companies, any product of which, if I were to say that I was behind that getting into a patient, that is a joy, right? Mm-hmm. So one of them is a cure for metastasized cancer that is cured when it's in the liver. Well, if metastasized cancer gets to the liver, you're dead. That's it. And this kills that tumor within 1 week. And it's there. It's already proven. Okay. But he has to get another $40 to $80 million to get it to the license so that the other company, the big company, can market it, because they're a bunch of young guys who are saying, I don't know, prove it. Okay. I'm satisfied and he's satisfied, but they're not. Another one is a cure for COVID-19 long haulers. Okay, it was developed for premature babies who their lungs are not fully developed, but they're early, and they die because their lungs aren't strong. And she's tested it there, but it's also the same problem that occurs with COVID-19, because that's what COVID attacks. Well, if we can solve that problem for the long haulers, wow. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So as you're doing this, and we talk about business, we talk about investing, we talk about kind of your motive, right? We, through our questionings, we try to uncover people's motives of why they're doing things. Like, you love business and you love the idea of creating an impact by helping heal people, right? If you had to, let me think of how to ask this question. It might not be a fair question.
I appreciate you being respectful of that.
Yeah. All right. I might
ask away. I'll take a stab at it.
So, okay. So you got 8 companies in your portfolio, and you had to choose one to kind of like double down. Don't give the exact name, but how would you go about choosing which one to double down on? Okay. So I don't want you to give away which name, because you guys are doing some cool portfolio stuff, but like, how would you go about choosing which one that you went all in? All those books you sold at a yard sale, all the stocks, bonds, property, you went all in on. How would you go about making that decision, which portfolio company to go through? So don't tell the name. I don't want to get you in trouble with your CEOs.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Well, it first of all, it depends upon what the audience that I'm faced with. Okay, the most common one is what we talked about to start with, and I think you were kind of hinting at that when you were saying this. It might be an unfair question. That the one I am actually faced with that right now. We think that we have a investment bank that is going to proceed, and we said, okay, you got to come up with money by the end of the year, and they don't need. We need $270 million to do all these companies and take it through the full 3-year program, 3.5-year program. But we only need 100 million right away. And of that, we only need 15 now to pay for all the due diligence and so forth that you want us to do. Mm-hmm. So we're not going to proceed unless you promise me you'll come in with 15 million by the end of this year. Okay. And that the fees off of that pay the bills. All right. Yeah, I'm sharing that. So I think that's okay. Okay. So now he says, well, good. We will do that. We'll bridge one of them. You choose which one you think is the most likely to make it easy for us to bridge. And we will then raise the 15 million. Now, keep in mind that we are a special purpose vehicle, so we can do only one company and still be the investment manager. And so we chose one. And it was the one that has the most glamorous presentation and has followed my instructions on how to do a pro forma and did all that and fought me all the way, but she did it, you know.
Yeah.
And it's also, by the way, it's a woman-owned and woman-managed company, which is particularly good because that fits in nicely into the current fashion.
Very cool. So, as we are kind of rounding out the end, what are some things that you look for in a business where you go, hey, I'll get involved in this business? Because people might come to you, they have a life science business, they're like, hey, we want to be a part of the portfolio, we want you guys to come work with us. What's a red flag that you walk away immediately in terms of, let's not talk about financials or numbers, let's talk about character traits of leadership. What are some things that you just about the people?
One of the nice things in life sciences is the people are really nice people.
Yeah.
They are dedicated to helping others and giving their gift. And so that's the first criteria. It is such a pleasure to deal with people who aren't necessarily some of the other fields that I've been in. Okay. And I guess you know which one I'm referring to. So that's the first issue. The second is, are they kidding themselves? Are they a fool who is going to be soon separated from their money? It has to be a unique product with a big market that is worthy of the amount of work it's going to take to bring the capital in, finish the project, and catch the attention of now big pharma, because you probably are aware in life science, big pharma does not do its own R&D. Big pharma sponsors, licenses these entrepreneurial independents, and they make a lot of money if it works on both sides, and huge amounts of money get flung go around.
Yeah. So as you're building these companies, you're working on, with some investment banks, you're going to raise a big, good amount of money, and you're going to help these companies go to market, help heal some people. What's typically a good outcome for, a group, a life science group? Is it a licensing deal with a big pharma? Is it an exit, an IPO? Like, what does that typically look for? What do you look for?
Yeah, it's usually a licensing deal.
Okay.
Because the cost of marketing pharmaceuticals is so high. It is just huge sales and marketing organizations behind it.
Yeah.
And you've got to call in the doctors and the hospitals.
Yeah. So let's do this. What question should I have asked you on this interview? Time kind of flew by, tempest fugit, like time flew for us. What question should I have asked you, about your business, that you wish I would have asked you?
Well, that's a trick question. My gosh, I see that one. Well, Josh, in preparing for something like this, which you can't prepare for, you really don't prepare for this. I'm dependent upon you as the interviewer. Yeah. I knew you enough, because we had met a couple of times before, to trust you that you'd ask the questions and lead me to what you think might be interesting to your audience. I think you've done a good job of that. Where would we go from here? I guess the question is, what do you? Here's one for you. You probably want me to give you the question is the most troublesome thing that I deal with in the middle of the night.
What keeps you up at night?
3:30 in the morning is rigid. Okay, which by the way is, and that is, what happens if the capital doesn't come in that we're raising on one side? What happens if it comes in and these people I'm trusting fail? And so I'm in the middle. That's the worry. So all of my systems, which is of course being a good businessman, are to make sure both of those things happen. The capital arrives so I don't disappoint my clients, and the clients are responsible so I don't disappoint my investors. So.
It's weird that 3:30 is the entrepreneurial alarm clock. Like if I wake up and like I'm bothered by something, I look at the clock and it's almost 3:30 every single time. It's weird.
Yeah,
Is that your time too?
it is. It is.
Yeah.
And I first heard the expression by the CEO of Pete's Coffee, who's headquartered over in Berkeley here,
Yeah.
who said, so it's really good to be a member of this organization because when you wake up rigid at 3:30 in the morning, you have the answer you heard from the meeting you were at this week. Okay, and he went into the store. And so it's not just you and me, Josh, it's others.
It's also Pete's Coffee. Well,
Yeah.
we'll get some Pete's Coffee. This episode is sponsored by Pete's Coffee. If you're waking up at 3:30 and you might as well be up, you might as well drink some nice hot coffee. So Jack, where could people connect with you and maybe do a deal with you and learn more about you and maybe do a deal with you?
Well, how kind of you. My email is jed@innocom, INNOCOM bio.com. Okay. You can reach me there, and that's also the website, www.innocombio.com.
Very cool. I appreciate you coming on the show. I always have great conversations with you about, just about life in general. And I try to ask questions about wisdom and philosophy and things that help create good deal makers, behind the scenes. Counting numbers and spreadsheets and such is really fun about deals. But I appreciate you bringing wisdom to our conversations because I could definitely use it. So Jack, thanks for being on the show, man. I appreciate you. Ladies and gentlemen, listening into the Deal Scout. If you're working on a deal, want to explore a deal, or maybe even connect with one of our deal makers, head on over to thedealscout.com, fill out a quick form. Let's have a chat and maybe get you on the show next. Till then, talk to you all next episode. See you guys.
Thank you, Josh. Bye-bye.